the film that me and Tom are going to talk about today, it's directed by Wes Craven, but it's not Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's not even Last House on the Left, which would be probably a good fit for this show. It's The Hills Have Eyes.
Which is kind of in the middle of those two in terms of,
Yeah, it's very interesting. It came out in between those two.
Literally in between, and I would say in terms of what you expect in between.
So, just to warn everybody, I don't think this is a very disturbing film, so I don't think I need to warn people about that, but there's probably going to be a lot of spoilers, so just watch out for that. So as we already mentioned, film's directed by Wes Craven. Now, Wes Craven's a bit of an interesting kind of director, I think. So, yes, he has one great film, I think, which is the one that everyone knows. And then he's got Scream, which you don't really like Scream. I remember we had this conversation on the Slasher Film Show on the Lament Configuration. You said you weren't really a fan.
I like Scream. It's all right, but it's by no means his best thing. And I think it started off that whole postmodern horror thing in the 90s. Scream is okay, but then everything after it is not great.
Yeah.
Not great. Basically, all that I Know We Did Last Summer, everything became very nudge, wink, wink at the camera. It's like, you know.
Yeah.
And Scream is not particularly scary or anything, and some of the jokes are a bit dated, like, hey, what's Leatherface doing here? It's like, yeah, I get the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference. Where's well done.
And then, he did Last House on the Left, which I've reviewed elsewhere.
Yeah.
And he's done... Wes Craven's a weird one, because he's considered like a horror icon. He's considered a great director of horror, but he does have a lot of shit in his back catalogue.
I would say he's got maybe 5 films that I think are good, but most of them not. I think what he does have going for him is that he always comes across as a really nice guy in interviews. So if he was a bit of an arse, in the way that Sean Cunningham is a bit of an arse, then I would be more encouraged to go, you know what, he's crap or whatever. But Wes Craven almost gets a pass. You kind of let him off because he's a nice guy, and he did, you know, iconic films like Nightmare, Hills of Eyes, and Last House. Nicely spread out, nicely different temperatures, if you will, of horror.
Yeah. Now you say that. I mean, he's made films that I think are quite good as well. Not amazing, but Serpent and the Rainbow, which I quite like. Sort of a Haitian sort of zombie type film. People Under the Stairs, which we've established off air that you don't like.
I don't like. It's a little bit jumping the shark. It's a little bit crazy. A bit too crazy for me.
But he's also done stuff like Shocker, which is which is and Mitch Pileggi. You need to see that.
I think a lot of sorry, Karen.
And like Swamp Thing.
Like Swamp Thing.
I believe it or not, never seen Swamp Thing.
It's okay.
Okay, I need to check it out.
Granted, it's a bit cheesy.
And then, unfortunately, at the other end of the scale, we have Vampire in Brooklyn.
You see, I put that and People Under the Stairs both at the same caliber of not very good, personally.
Chiller, which no one likes and don't think even people have heard of. And a film that came out this decade that I think is fucking terrible. It's called My Soul to Take. It's the film he did before Scream 4. So it's kind of his second to last film that he directed before. Unfortunately, he passed away. Oh, God, I need to watch it again. Because from what I remember of it, it's just so bad. It's just fucking terrible. But yeah, so not recommended from me if you haven't seen that one. But yeah, he obviously did direct sort of The Hills Have Eyes, which we've talked about. Now, quite curiously, because this is like a 70s exploitation-y kind of film, there aren't really any kind of big stars in it. But it is well known, obviously, for having Michael Berryman.
Yeah.
Who would be quite known, actually. So he was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which came out 2 years before this. This is 1977. And Dee Wallace. But this is Dee Wallace before she was kind of known for like The Howling and stuff like that.
This is pre-E.T., I think.
Yeah, and pre-E.T. and stuff as well.
Early film for her.
Yeah. Actually, it's really weird that she's in this, and then 5 years later she's in E.T.
Very weird.
That is so weird. So weird.
Peter Cushing's last film before Star Wars was Shockwaves. So who knows? You never know what's going to happen in your film career, where things are going to progress.
Gotta get Nazi zombies on every show.
Got Nazi zombie reference into it. I'll probably get Friday the 13th one at some point, but give me a chance.
Oh well, you already mentioned Sean Cunningham.
I have.
So
there you go.
Got that one in there. So for anyone who doesn't know the plot of The Hills Have Eyes, Tom, can you take it away with the plot?
Short version, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre Light.
Okay.
Slightly longer version. A family are traveling across the desert in their sort of caravan. They crash, and then they are sort of hunted down by a group of savage cannibal family who are kind of their opposite, and they have to sort of discover the savage in themselves to beat the other family, which inevitably they do.
Yeah,
that's a short version.
Pretty much, that's a pretty short version of the film.
Very straightforward morality tale.
Now, interestingly, or maybe not interestingly, I don't know, this was remade in 2006, and it has exactly the same plot that you've just said. Now, the remake's directed by Alexandre Aja, a director of Hortension, which is also called Switchblade Romance for some reason, which I really like. It's a very, very violent French kind of slashery sort of film from like the early 2000s.
Yep.
I still think it's his best film. And then he made The Hills Have Eyes, and then he made Piranha 3D, which I don't like.
Nah, I don't think so.
And then every film he's made after that is basically not very good.
You know, I give Piranha 3D a pass. It is
Piranha 3D.
It's a light piece of crap, isn't it? I mean, you know.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, interestingly, in the cast of that film, we actually have people who are kind of well-known actors.
Yeah.
Now, you have Ted Levine, who plays the dad. Obviously, he's Buffalo Bill. That's kind of what he's mostly known for. Cool. And I suppose other than that, the only person on the cast of that one which stands out is Emily de Ravin, because she would have been in Lost at this point, I believe. So she kind of stands out for that one. But it's quite curious that comparing the two, I've always found this with films from the 70s. Do you think it takes you out of the film if you've got an actor and you know who they are, and you've got kind of baggage, I guess, with them?
I would say the beauty of a lot of exploitation films is that you don't know the cast that well. And if you go back and watch something, like going back and watching Dee Wallace, even though nobody knew who she was at the time, I'm just seeing E.T.'s mum. And it's very hard to get beyond that. Right. So, in a way, an unknown cast is better for that kind of... It does take you out. The short answer is yes.
Yeah. So, in both versions of the film, you've got exactly the same setup. So, you've got a family of 6 people. So, you've got a patriarch, like Big Bob.
Yeah,
it's a great name. And he is married to Ethel, and they have 3 children. So, you've got an oldest daughter, whose name's Lynn, and she's married to Doug. And they have 2 younger children who are Brenda and Bobby.
Yep.
It's literally the same in both films. There's no difference. Now, you are quite a... What's the word I'm thinking of?
Defender.
You're a defender,
remake.
That's it.
Yes.
You're a defender of the Hills Have Eyes remake.
Many discussions with many people about the sins of remakes and how remakes, generally speaking, are a terrible idea. They should never do them. But I would say there are exceptions to the rules. There are examples where it works. I tend not to refer to The Thing and The Fly, simply because those films...
Basic bitch stuff.
Well, not only that, but John Carpenter's Thing and Cronenberg's The Fly are completely different, such big and completely different entities from their originals that they exist independent of them, if you catch my drift. You know, you don't need to have any concept of Vincent Price's The Fly to watch David Cronenberg's The Fly. You don't. Whereas the Hills Have Eyes remake, I would say it's a true remake in the sense of that film does not exist without the original. And it's another good example of a remake because it gives you just that right balance. I always think remakes go wrong. To go very briefly about remakes, they go wrong either A, when they're not true enough to the source material, or B, when they're too close to the source material. So when a remake is literally the same bloody thing, like Teen Wolf 2, rubbish. And when it's completely different, like Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, and you call it reimagining, you can call it that if you want, but it's just a shitty remake. Whereas the Hills Have Eyes remake, yes, the story is the same, but they give it a few twists. They take a few things from the original that only get briefly mentioned, the mine, and the fact that it's a nuclear test zone, and they run fucking crazy with it in the remake. So spoilers,
Ahoy.
The cannibal family isn't just some cannibal family, which in the original is not explained that well, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
In the remake, there's this family who were miners. They used the site. The military started using the site for nuclear tests. They hid in the mine, but they came out all fun, deformed and crazy. And I'm like, actually, that's quite a good angle. That it's in touch with the original film, but it's not explicitly explored in the original film. That's what I want from a remake. That's why I use it as an example.
Yeah, it is very, very, very much the same in a lot of ways. It does have a few very, very key differences, but I wanted to go over on the show. But for the most part, it is the same, literally the same, but there's a couple of details different, a couple of plot lines are different, but it is literally the same. There's even dialogue in the remake which is taken, which is very interesting because I've watched both for the show. There's
in close proximity, I understand, so you've really got a fresh
very much so. It's very, very strange. Like, so there's a line of dialogue that's played for laughs where Bobby is talking to his mum and the mum brings up snakes and things like that, and he mentions, "Oh, you know what Freud would say." Like,
Freud would say about that, Mum.
Yeah, it's the same joke in both films.
I don't blame them though, because The Hills of Ice has some fucking great dialogue. All the stuff about devil dogs and get out of my way, bitch, and just anything the redneck cannibal family says is gold dust.
Yeah. So in the original film, like you said, they're sort of a cannibal family, and I find they're more feral.
Yeah.
Whereas in the remake, they're more mutated.
Quite literally. So, yes.
I suppose because of budget. So I guess the remake must have had a much bigger budget than the original.
Much bigger budget, but like I said before, like with a remake, you want to do something different. So if they were just another feral family, I probably would be less bothered. You gotta give me something. You gotta justify remaking this, and if you're just going to do the exact same thing, I would be less inclined to watch it.
Yeah, and the effects in the remake are done by like Greg Nicotero, and they are very good. Yeah, in fairness, although he did do the effects in the remake as well, the sequel to the remake rather as well, and they're like,
well, that is clearly lower budget, and it's just not very good. The remake sequel, hard to get my head around.
In the remake though, they're really good. My favourite part of the remake actually is literally the first kind of minute where it's those people who have got, I think it's Geiger counters in the area, and they've got those Hazchem suits on, and then they get killed really violently with pickaxes. That's awesome.
They get hunted down in the sequel, whereas in the original, they're kind of just waiting for them to crash and then pounce on them. So that's another cool element to the remake. They make them more hunters, survivalists.
In the original, they're more like scavengers.
Yeah, they're scavengers in the original.
What I would say.
Yeah. And they really go to town. I mean, that in the remake, the whole nuclear test site town that they kind of live in, it's just brilliant. So, somebody really thought to themselves, I am going to go to town with this whole nuclear thing, and I'm even gonna have a nuclear like fake town that they all live in. They had the guy in the wheelchair, and it's all kind of crazy. All kinds of crazy.
Yeah, it's more in the sort of last third of the remake that it does deviate quite a lot from the original. So the first 2/3 are basically the same. So you got this family, they go in the middle of a desert. Now in the remake, it's because they're trying to get to California. Though they're going to California in the original as well. Yeah. And it's really weird. Like in the original, like they just have a big argument in the car and they just crash. There's no reason for them to crash. They just sort of do.
They see a bunny in the road.
Oh no!
They see a bunny in the road, and that bunny comes up again later.
Oh,
could be a secondary bunny. We don't know, but they're arguing about whether or not they're on a testing gunnery range, even though 2 jet planes have flown overhead. And then Bob loses his shit and basically says, "I'm going to turn this car
Big
around."
Bob.
Then somebody throws a map in his face and he takes the map down. There's a rabbit. They crash.
Yeah,
it's just an excuse for a crash.
It's just a big excuse for them to crash. Whereas in the remake, they do kind of think about it a bit more. And it's like, the gas station attendant, he's in on it. And it's like setting them up, saying, well, if you take this side road, you'll save 2 hours. And,
which is very different from the original. Because in the original, it's the total opposite. He's like, whatever you do, don't go down there.
Don't go down that road. Whatever it was he said.
Yeah. Stay on the main road. Stay on the main road.
Yeah, which obviously they're not going to do because they're stupid.
No, and it's, I chuckled when this is very, Crazy Ralph. The other day, me and the missus, we were re-watching Cabin in the Woods, and the whole setup with the Harbinger, the guy at the gas station that is in every single...
I need to rewatch that film.
knockoff slasher film. And in a way, it almost goes back to this scene, the almost abandoned gas station with the old man saying, don't go there, don't go there, and then they do it. And it's like, and like they say in Cabin in the Woods, you have to have that in there, because they have to break the rules. They have to go against the advice, and it justifies their punishment, because they should have done what they were told.
Exactly. Yeah, that always happens. Now, was it just me, or... I know obviously you're a defender of the remake anyway,
right, yeah.
But like you said, I have obviously watched both films within quite close proximity to one another. I found the main family, not the cannibal family, to be much more likeable in the remake. Because in the original, they don't really establish a lot of the characters, other than you got Big Bob. He used to be in the police. He's got a bad heart.
They established that very quickly.
Yeah, they use that kind of bad movie exposition that a lot of these sort of 70s and 80s films use, where like people just bring stuff up randomly for no reason that will play a big part in the plot later on.
It's just like, hey, do you need some gas? Well, I used to be in the force and I have a heart problem, and now we're going to California, but on the way we're going to a mine. I didn't ask any of those questions, but thanks for the answers.
It was awesome. But other than that, there isn't really a lot. So they very briefly established the mum is kind of religious. They copy the scene in the remake where they have a prayer before they separate, and all the bad stuff happens. They have the scene where Big Bob is being crucified on this sort of makeshift cross. They do it very differently in the original. In the remake, I didn't like that because they did it in a very Saw kind of music video-y kind of way, where he just appears on there and he's surrounded by obvious CGI fire. It just looked kind of shit. I didn't really like it. But in the original, it's sort of a bit more... I mean, obviously, hey, Wes Craven clearly didn't have the budget back then, so it's very much... You sort of see them put him on the cross. You can kind of get that feel of it. But other than that, the characters aren't really... developed that much. I felt in the remake they kind of gave the characters a bit more, they felt more like a family that actually kind of got on with each other and stuff like that. So yeah, and the Doug character is very different in the remake from the original.
I like the family in the original, but yeah, they're not fully developed characters by any means. This is a sort of slightly ropey exploitation film, and I guess by the time you get to the remake, they want to make it a bit more polished. Yeah. You know. But, and this might be a bit controversial, conversely, I think the cannibal family in the original are better than in the remake. This is completely this is disregarding like the makeup effects, which are clearly obviously going to be much better in the remake because you've got more money and things like that. I think in the original, you kind of know who they all are, and they all have very sort of... particular roles. There's a family dynamic that you definitely family dynamic and get. Whereas in the remake, the only ones I really remember who are the one who's clearly supposed to be like the Michael Berryman character, who's got like the big guy, and you got the guy who has got the big neck. Yeah, and that's it. I don't really remember any of the other mutants. There were other mutants, but they were almost just like side characters. Just as you say. I mean, what's great about the family in the remake is how cool they all look. You release them as a series of toys. You get them all because they're just cool looking mutants. You would get them all. Clearly. I would get them all. Yeah, but I totally agree. The family in the cannibal family in the original is far better. There's a proper family dynamic. You totally get it. You not just like that's the dad. You get that Mars and Pluto, they're brothers, but you know that Mars is the older brother or the more in charge brother. By the way he talks to Pluto, you get that Mercury is got to be the youngest, if not the kid of the family. Yeah. You know, you clearly sense the dynamic. And you got Ruby as well. Yeah. And you got the mother. For some reason, Mother's the only one that is a bit of a mystery. Yeah. Because she's just some kidnapped whore, which is the way they describe her. And they're like, really? And she doesn't really appear in the film that much. Does she even die? What, in the original? In the original. I don't even think she dies. She's just... Ruby? No, in the original. I don't even think... Is she even in the reboot at all? I mean, she's not really that important. I haven't seen the reboot in a long time, but I think there's a Ruby-esque character. Oh, no, Ruby is... There is a Ruby character in the reboot. I just meant the Mama character. Oh, the mum. I thought you were talking about Ruby. No. She doesn't die in the original. She's kind of knocked on the head. by Ruby, isn't she? When she's
Kind
looking all
of,
dazed
yeah.
and confused. So she's like the only surviving member, really, other than Ruby. She's just in the cave on her own. And then I don't even remember that character being in the remake. I think there's similar characters.
Now, we're talking about family.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask about Fast and the Furious, which, from what I've also been told, is about family. But you've kind of already mentioned it, so I think I'd bring it up anyway. So I'm going to ask a slightly devil's advocate-y kind of question.
Cool.
Is this film basically just a rip-off of Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Did Wes Craven watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre and go, I could do that?
Yes, is the short answer. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my favourite movie of all time. So there's no question of it being better than The Hills of Ice. There's no question there.
It is.
Furthermore, Wes Craven has freely admitted that he watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre and went, I want to make Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And even the cave that the Savage family live in, a lot of the props in it came directly from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre set. They had like the prop designer or whoever turned up with a truckload of, spines and cow hides and things directly from. So there's no shame on The Hills of Ice part of being a cheaper, like I said, Texas Chainsaw Massacre light version, because that's kind of what they were going for. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is far more artistic, dark and serious. This film is the lighter version. This film basically carries on Wes Craven's kind of obsession with duality and like the rape revenge Last House on the Left storyline of civilized people will turn savage when pushed too far in order to outdo evil. In order to defeat evil, you have to become a little bit evil. So it's that played out. It's more mythological in that sense, straightforward. Than Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is just sort of dark and fucked up in a way.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of my favourite horror films of all time. I think it has to be everyone, if you like horror, has to say that they like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But it is very much true. I think it has that same kind of cheap feel as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But what it doesn't have is kind of the intensity. No. It really isn't very... Apart from one scene kind of about 2/3 of the way through... It's not that intense as such, but to me, like you said, I totally agree. It does have the whole sort of, you've got the two families, and then one's kind of the inverse of the other. Yeah. So you've got the family from the city or whatever, and you've got this other family who are still like a proper like nuclear family unit. You've got a mother and you've got a father, Papa Jupe. And you've got Mars and you've got Pluto and Mercury and you've got Ruby. So it's kind of like a similar family dynamic to the main family. And they even kind of work in a similar way. In a way, they're almost kind of more unified, I guess, because, they have to be like that way. Because, like I mentioned, they're scavengers, so you need to get food and things like that. So, it does work quite well. In the remake, it doesn't feel like that, which is the problem I have with a lot of these kind of films, where in the 70s and whatever, I've said this before, whereas people, if you were going to make a film, you had to have an underlying subtext and a message and things like that. It's like, well, what's this really about? Whereas the remake, it's kind of, it doesn't really have any subtext to speak of. It's just, there's a family and they kind of get picked off by cannibals and these mutated people. And that's about it.
If you compare let's call them the cannibal families from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills of Ice, I agree, the Hills of Ice family certainly has a more straightforward dynamic. They have a plan when they set out. And this might sound weird when we're talking about cannibals, but they don't seem crazy in the way that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family does. It's a miracle the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family haven't been arrested yet. Whereas the savages living in the wilderness in the Hills of Ice, they do seem to be they can disappear into the wilderness. They are like a sort of native population who live out naturally in the wilderness, and they've got their shit together, and they know how to set traps, and they know how to hunt people down. So they've got their marbles as far as I'm concerned. Whereas Leatherface and the Hitchhiker and the Cook, they're just batshit crazy. Like
basically,
I said. Something I just want to bring up, and this ties into your which is better. the amount of articles and documentaries and stuff that I've seen on 70s horror and, the American Nightmare, and you always get like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Dawn of the Dead, Last House on the Left, and Hills of Eyes all chucked in together into one big melting pot. And Hills of Eyes always stands out for me as being, I'm not 100% sure if it belongs in that club, not because it's bad, but because the Hills of Eyes seem to have a sense of humour, or it's a little bit...
It's a bit goofy, isn't it?
It's a bit goofy, and it has a sense of humour. It's got its tongue in its cheek in a way that you don't really get in Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Dawn of the Dead. They do have their occasional comic elements, but this film seemed a lot more lighter in that sense. It's a
bit more straightforward as well. Really,
it's a lot more straightforward. In terms of its straightforwardness, I've heard it said that it's kind of the old-fashioned Western story of a wagon going across the desert being attacked by Indian savages, except now the Indians have been updated to be white trash. But they're still Indians in the sense that they, Mercury has a feathery, like, Native American hat, doesn't he? And they're all running around with axes, and, you've got these, not Native American names, but these ridiculous pagan god names of Pluto and Mars and stuff. So it's very much going, okay, well, the new Western has the new savages, and the new savages are these terrifying rednecks, be it the Sawyer family from Texas Chainsaw Massacre or these guys. The rednecks kind of replace the savage and the civilized people coming across the desert in their wagon, or in this case, caravan.
Yeah. Which, as I said, I think that is one of the good things about Wes Craven. I did kind of slag him off kind of earlier, but he's a very intelligent, thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
So he clearly has thought about this. Same with Last House on the Left as well. Like he's clearly thought about, okay, I want to make a film. I want to make it about this.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about this is. First of all, is that this obviously was directed by Wes Craven, but it's also written by Wes Craven, whereas the remake was only produced by Wes Craven.
Yeah.
It was written by Aja's regular writing partners, Gregory Lavassier, I think is how you say his name. But he's written, all his better films are basically written by him. He hasn't worked with him for a while, and his films are not as good or as widely well regarded, and there's a reason for that, I believe. So there's that side, which is quite interesting. But also there's a film that the original Hills Have Eyes really reminds me of. It's Eaten Alive by Tobe Hooper. It's got a kind of weird kind of electronic score, which is very kind of disco, apart from the funky bits.
Yep, the funk.
You don't get that in Eaten Alive.
You don't get that anymore. They should have had that in the remake. We need some funk.
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? They're like the weird kind of electronic, almost computery, modem-y sort of noises. That's the same in Eaten Alive. And just kind of, the very weird feel as well is quite raw. That's the one thing I would say about the original, is it's very raw as well, so it did kind of remind me of that.
It's not just raw because it's a cheap exploitation film either. The desert in this, it feels almost like it feels like Mars. It feels like an alien planet. It doesn't feel like Earth, particularly when he's climbing amongst the hills themselves, the cliffs and the rocks. It just seems so alien to me.
Yeah, although in the remake, obviously, it looks very nice. So it's very kind of orangey yellow. Yeah. It's very kind of picturesque. It's almost
like that's what you think a desert should look like. Whereas this, they actually shot it in a desert, and that's just, I think it was a dried up riverbed or something. That's why it's such a sort of, shallow dip and then goes up with the hills.
But as well as that, I was going to say the major difference to me, apart from the fact that obviously the cannibal family are sort of very heavily mutated in the remake, is the Doug character. Now, I don't know if this is because they didn't feel that the family were that well developed and they wanted to change it. But in the original, you do have his character having the moment near the end where he kind of loses his shit because his baby's been kidnapped, and his wife's been killed by this guy Mars, and so he absolutely loses it and stabs him about 1 million times.
He has his own final girl moment, final girl moment,
kind of,
where he switches.
Whereas in the remake, and this is one of the things I don't like so much about the remake, is that character is basically very clearly from the beginning being set up as like where he's really heavily put upon. He's clearly under the thumb. The dad, Big Bob, makes fun of him because clearly they're like a Republican family, and he's like, oh, he's a Democrat. He works in telecommunications. He's got glasses. He's clearly a bit of a dweeb.
Like Republican dweeb, Republican Democrat divide. All families have this.
And then it basically becomes Straw Dogs.
I was going to say, just as a side note, did you ever see the Straw Dogs remake?
I've never seen the Straw Dogs remake.
They fucking ruin it by going uber Straw Dogs in the sense of that kind of, oh, he's such a wimp. Oh, I wonder if they're setting him up to be, hulking out and going like completely nuts on the other
whatsoever.
side.
It's so on the nose. It's ridiculous.
And with Straw Dogs in the original, you do have that kind of, obviously the flip where he changes. But because his name escapes me, he plays Straw Dogs.
Dustin Hoffman.
He isn't he's physically not an intimidating guy. Whereas really in the Straw Dogs remake, the guy is a bit like Clark Kent. He's clearly buff, but has glasses. And the glasses is like, that makes him a dweeb. And then when he does turn in the Straw Dogs remake, you're just kind of like, yeah, but he was always a tough guy. And I imagine that's what you're getting at. With this too obvious switch that you get.
It's very interesting. I was going to bring this up later, but that was one of the problems I have with the Last House on the Left remake, because in the original Last House on the Left, the Doctor he's a doctor. He's like just this sort of weedy, sort of nebbish kind of guy. Whereas in the remake, the Doctor is buff.
Yeah.
And clearly, like, if he got in a fight, he could probably handle himself. There isn't really any kind of suspense there, like, as to what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas in the remake, it is more believable that, he's less likely to kind of want to attack someone with a chainsaw, which is what happens in the end in that film. But I do agree with that. It does get absolutely ridiculous that this guy who's sort of this, supposed to be like this guy, doesn't like shooting guns, doesn't really like violence, would basically go completely mental, get completely covered with blood, murder people with pickaxes and stuff like that. It's just a bit, it's a bit cartoony.
Yeah.
I don't like that so much.
I don't know how you feel about this, but I found the original... Okay, so Doug's kind of... In the remake, Doug's the star of the show.
He's kind of the
Whereas
main
in the original, I felt like Bobby, the son, is really the guy carrying the story.
Absolutely.
From the moment he discovers the dog onwards, he's taken the burden of responsibility on himself, and Doug's just kind of there for the ride,
Yeah, I agree with that. In the remake, they really sideline the kids. The two younger so Bobby and Brenda are sort of not that important. They're kind of like, oh, we only really care about Doug, and they're just sort of there, just hanging around.
That does go into what you said about the family in the original is less developed as they are in the remake. In the remake, you've had God knows how many years of slasher genre features, and now you get to the stage where, okay, well, clearly we're going to make it all about Doug and his transition from dweeb to superhero, and these other characters are now just there to support that. Whereas in the original, they clearly went, well, this relationship between Bobby and his sister, arguably a very close relationship. But a lot
of sexual tension.
A lot of sexual incest going on there. Sexual incest tension, I guess. But yeah, there's more of a to and fro between them two, particularly towards the end when they set up their little MacGyver trap. And Doug's just kind of off on his own and has his little moment in the original, but it's really, for me, it's all about Bobby. I'm rooting for Bobby.
Yeah. In the remake, I didn't really like the Bobby in the remake. He got angry. He was too angsty for me. Whereas, the acting isn't that great, but you could tell, like, for most of the time that he was he was a bit morose, the Bobby. He was kind of trying to keep everything under the surface and sort of try and keep his shit together, so to speak. So, I don't know, that kind of worked a bit better for me. And like you said, it was sort of more his story.
Yeah.
And conversely, like with the cannibal family, like you said, because they're a lot more clearly defined as to who's who, you still have like the father character in the remake, but fuck knows who they are. They're just random mutants for the most part.
The only sort of family element that makes me properly chuckle in the original is the whole relationship, and I have to get this off my chest, between Fred, so the old man that runs the gas station, and his son, i.e. Papa Jupiter, who then goes up. So, spoilers. So, Big Bob, he's gone off at some point in the film to get help.
Yeah.
He comes across the gas station, and one thing leads to another, and Fred explains the backstory to the film for you.
Right.
Excellent. And he's like, basically, I had a son. He turned out to be this devil kid who grew up to be a devil man. I mean, he's got great lines like that. And this kid, basically, I smashed him over the face with a tire iron after he burned our house down and dumped him in the desert. And since then, he's been living in the desert, kidnapped a whore and raised a family of cannibals who essentially, I know because I've traded with them, that they kill people, eat them, and steal their stuff. But I'm totally okay with this. That seems to be Fred's thing. How do you feel about that? Because he's presented as a nice guy, but I'm like, actually, he's pretty weird. He's pretty messed up. He's kind of like the cook from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, except the cook is made out to be one of the horrible family members, whereas Fred in this, he's kind of let off as being I didn't want anything to do with this. I tried to kill the boy, as if that's okay.
Yeah, the cook's kind of like the one in charge.
Yeah.
At least that's how it's presented, whereas, Fred's kind of like just a victim.
But when Fred's explaining this to Big Bob kind of accepts it. He's like, oh, you poor thing. I was like, what do you mean you poor thing? He hasn't reported these people to the police, even though he knows that they're living out in the desert with God knows how many murdered victims in their bellies.
Exactly.
It's a strange family dynamic.
Very, very strange. Now, the only thing, because obviously, hey, it's the worst date movies ever, so I have to think about kind of, well, how might this not be a very good date movie? And the only thing I can really think of is the kind of main scene that I referred to earlier. It's about, in the remake, it's about halfway in. In the original, it's about 2/3 of the way in, where it's sort of like a home invasion where you kind of see the family properly for the first time. Now, I get that you said you haven't seen the remake for a while. In the remake, it's a lot more kind of uncomfortable than in the original. The original, I remember being worse than it actually was. So essentially what you've got is you've got Mars and Pluto kind of... In the original, they're kind of like the scavengers, so they're trying to get food, they're trying to get stuff together, and they see Brenda sleeping. Obviously, she's quite attractive, and hey, they probably haven't seen a woman for quite a while, so
it's very hot out in the desert.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, and they kind of molest her. Now, there's implied kind of sort of rape, but I don't think she actually gets raped as such. It's maybe attempted.
In a documentary I've seen, they refer to it as the rape scene, but it doesn't. When you watch it at the time, it doesn't. It seems more like attempted rather than actual rape.
And you've got the bird's head being ripped off by Mars, and he drinks the blood.
I would say the worst thing about the entire scene is the ripping off the bird's head and drinking it like a fruit juice box.
Pretty much. And
that's kind of like gross.
They kept that for the remake. Yeah. And I suppose, you've got obviously two members of the family being killed. It's the same in both versions.
Yeah,
so
it's a proper heightened moment.
Yeah, the mother basically gets killed, although she doesn't die straight away, and then the older sister gets killed.
Dee Wallace. Gone so early.
Yeah, very, very early. Yeah, definitely. And but in the original, they don't really make a big thing out of it as such. It just seemed to...
Right.
I get that there's the attempted rape or whatever, but that mostly happens off screen, and then they kill whoever they kill, and then they kind of just go. Whereas in the remake, they really, really play it up. It's actually kind of sort of upsetting in a way, because they proper there's a lot of groping and things like that. So it's a lot more kind of where they're going to take the baby, and she's like, don't take my baby. And they kind of make her, I don't know, touch her, and it's kind of a bit icky.
Torture porn generation version. You got to up the ante. The kids won't take this nonsense from the 70s. They need some more grotesque stuff going on.
Be, heightened,
I guess.
But other than that, I don't know, it's going to make me sound really desensitized. I think I say that every show. But other than that, there isn't really anything that kind of upsetting, I don't think.
It's funny.
Standard horror film.
The sort of stuff that goes on in this film. So you've got cannibalism. Yep. You've got the mutilated dog.
Yeah.
You've got
Bird obviously getting his head ripped off.
Bird getting his head ripped off. You've got like a corpse being put in a deck chair as some kind of a trap. When you run off the list of things, there's a lot of fucked up things that happen in this film. But as I said earlier, this film kind of has its tongue in its cheek. It's almost done in a sort of gallows humour kind of way. So it's less shocking and more just makes you chuckle a little bit. And maybe that's its kind of saving grace for me, because I really enjoyed this film, but I don't find it disturbing. If someone says, how could you enjoy a film about cannibalism and messing around with corpses and all the things I just run up and went, you have to watch it. It's kind of fun. It's
just
not
watch it.
It's not a flat out horror comedy. It's not Evil Dead or anything like that. It's not a horror comedy, but it's about 2/3 horror, 1/3 comedy. There's a little bit of, gallows humor, as I said. It's morbid at times.
Okay, so with that in mind, it's going to be quite interesting for you, maybe. Yeah. Of the two versions, which do you prefer? Do you prefer the original or the remake?
Obviously, I prefer the original.
Okay.
I think the cannibal family is better developed. And, at the risk of towing the party line and saying the original is always better, the original is just better. I enjoy them. I certainly have watched the original way more times than I've watched the remake, even though I like the remake.
Yeah, because this is one of those rare remakes where there is a lot of sentiment online where the remake is better. Because if you think about it, so because I'm not a massive fan of this film as compared to yourself, so I can kind of look at this slightly more objectively, maybe. In that I was never a huge fan of the original, so the remake is better made. Well, obviously, it would be. Yeah. Which is kind of, well, duh. It's the same thing with the Last House on the Left remake. It's like, well, it's better shot. It's been better directed. Well, no fucking shit.
Yeah, when you...
Bigger budget, better actors.
Compare resources to end product.
Yeah.
I would say the original is more of a labour of love. And they do more with less.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I would put it. But the remake does have, as I've listed earlier on, some really good developments.
Yeah, I mean, superficially, the remake is much better because, well, it's got a bigger budget.
Yeah.
It looks nicer. It's better shot. It's got better actors. It's got better acting in it. And the characters, particularly, well, the main family, are way more developed. And obviously the effects are better and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's a lot. But at the same time, it does feel a bit pointless because it is so similar to the original in a lot of ways. It kind of makes you wonder, why have you made this other than maybe just to make it? So it doesn't have kind of the same sort of subtext to it, and it is very gory, but by like the time you get to sort of Doug going around sort of murdering sort of mutants with axes, turning into some kind of like, unkillable sort of superhero, and in the end it does get a bit ridiculous. It's fun, but not exactly. I like my horror films anyway, to have a bit more atmosphere and a bit more kind of tension. It doesn't really have any tension, whereas less happens in inverted commas in the original, but you're always wondering kind of, well, are the family going to come back? Are they going to attack the van? It becomes almost like a home invasion film, I think, in a lot of ways. So I would say I slightly prefer the original as well, even though, it's less well made, but whatever.
I think
it's got Michael Berryman in it.
And it's got Michael Berryman in it. Andy Wallace. I think I care more about the characters in the original, even though they're not as well developed. I care more about Bobby and his sister. I care about them. I care about the cannibal family. I've heard Michael Berryman say in interviews that people feel really sorry for the cannibal family once they start getting picked off one by one. Particularly when he gets attacked by the dog. Yeah. He's human.
Awesome.
I suppose in the remake, they're almost not even human because they're such ridiculous mutants. Whereas in the original, they are,
they talk properly and stuff.
They are humans and they suffer and they have their family dynamic and they love each other as a family. So at the risk of getting sentimental about the cannibal family from the Hills of Eyes, I think I prefer, because you have those interrelationships are a bit more, I was going to say developed. Obviously, they're more developed in the original, but you know what I mean. It's more real.
So, would you recommend both films then, or just the original?
I would recommend both films.
Okay.
I recommend the remake, as I said before, as an example of, in my opinion, a good remake. One that as you says, even though you say it as almost a negative, that it's too. What's the point? The story's too similar. I would say it's just that kind of balance of it's similar enough, but comes up with its own takes as well. I would say watch both, but the original. If you can only watch one, watch the original, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. I'd recommend both. I think the remake, as far as remakes go, it's one of the better remakes of the 2000s by far. It does feel a bit perfunctory. It does make some slight deviations, but whether they're for the better or not, it's hard to say. Some of them are, some of them are.
I mean, let's make no mistakes. Remakes, generally speaking, are a bit pointless. You are sort of just taking something that's already been done and cashing in on it.
Basically,
it's, as you say, it's one of the better ones.
Absolutely. And, well, let's start with the original. Is the original a good date movie or a bad date movie?
I would say it's a great date movie, because I've even... Little personal moment here. I've watched it on a date.
Oh, okay.
And that date went very well. Don't raise your eyebrows like that. No hanky panky. It was just it was me and the missus. Were early on in our relationship. We were just sitting at home like we are here, and she was like, "Oh, I like that movie," and I was like, "Shall I put it on?" Put it on, and we both loved it. And great movie, really enjoyable. I think it has, like I said, moments of comedy-ish, or it's just light-hearted enough. If I put on Texas Chainsaw Massacre or The Last House on the Left, it might not have been as successful. I guess that's for another date movie thing, but I think The Hills Have Eyes is just nice enough.
Yeah.
Straightforward enough, perhaps to your disliking. It's very paint-by-numbers, generic horror, but... for that reason, perhaps that makes it good for a date thing. It's not too complicated.
Yeah,
not
it's
too strenuous.
90 minutes. It's pretty linear story. Pretty obvious kind of characters and stuff like that. It's like you say, it's a western. Westerns are sort of great, very straightforward stories, aren't they?
Good guys, bad guys.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I don't think this is really that bad of a date movie. If I was going to rate it out of 5, I'd probably give it a 1, to be honest. I have to give something a 1 out of 5, otherwise this is going to get very skewed. I mean, yeah, you do have some upsetting stuff in there, but I really don't think it's all that bad. I would be very, very surprised if I met anyone who was actually upset by this.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, the remake, would you say that's a good date movie or a bad date movie?
Probably not a good date movie. I mean, in this scenario, at the risk of confusing things, has the person seen the original?
Well, I'm...
Because if you just stuck on the remake without anyone ever seeing the original, they might be like, why are you making me watch this? Is the original as fucked up as this? And you'd be like, oh no, the original's a little bit fluffier than this. And he's like, well, why didn't you put that on? I don't...
Yeah. Yeah, it's more intense. It's certainly more gory, for sure. And it does have that sort of torture porny vibe. It's very kind of clean. It's very sort of... That's another thing that I kind of prefer about the original. The original is rawer, which you do get with sort of movies from the 70s. Whereas, it's just... The remake is just too polished and too clean. It's got no grit to it, really. Yeah, it's very gory and stuff. And it's got some kind of sort of upsetting stuff in it at times. But it's just not really that upsetting for the most part. I still don't think it's a very good date movie particularly. I'd probably give it a 2. It's definitely a worse date movie than the original, for sure.
I'd agree.
You would agree? Okay, cool. Glad to hear that. So you could probably get away with the original if you want to watch the original. You probably have a great grand old time, lots of fun, and the remake probably as well, although... Yeah, it's a little bit more upsetting.
Less so.
Now, as an interesting footnote to the show, this series has the weirdest chronology ever. So, the original film was directed by Wes Craven. That was followed by a sequel in 1984. So, Nightmare on Elm Street was not the only film that Wes Craven directed in 1984. There was The Hills Have Eyes 2, which is, quite frankly, a terrible film. It's basically like an 80s slasher film version of The Hills Have Eyes, which the only thing that people mention in reviews is Beast, who somehow is still in the film. So he gets taken to some sort of dog pound thing for years, and then he just gets let out. just for no reason, just by this group.
You're free.
all the characters in this film are basically sort of bike racers, but not like motorbikes like Harley Davidsons. They're like sort of those skinny motorbikes that people race and stuff like that. So they're doing these races. At one point, Michael Berryman, who died in the original, but is somehow back for the sequel, he gets on a bike and he's able to ride this bike and chase characters. I don't know how that works.
The 80s, man.
Yeah, it's very 80s. The way I've heard...
he at least has a neck brace or something after that drug attack, you know?
He's totally fine. And Beast, who, as I mentioned, is in this. The only thing that people mention in the reviews is that he has a flashback.
I remember now.
Because there are lots of flashbacks in this film, because Wes Craven's story goes that he made this film because he needed the money. Basically, he'd literally just done Nightmare on Elm Street and people didn't know if that was going to be a success or not. So he kind of started filming this, then he did Nightmare on Elm Street, and then he came back to finish it. And he needed to pad out the runtimes. That's why there's so many flashbacks.
If only he knew. Like, if you
including
had a time machine,
the dog.
You could say, Wes, Nightmare on Elm Street is going to be huge. You don't need to worry about the other film.
And the final girl is blind, which doesn't really make sense. So he's like this girl who's blind, who's always got makeup on and stuff, and she's very pretty, and she may as well not be blind is more my point. There's like no stigma to her blindness.
It does make her better in the desert or interact with
she
beasts
survives
better?
Somehow, and it's you might like it because the way I've heard it described, it's basically like a Friday the 13th sequel. So it's kind of like sort of maybe not part 5, but it's sort of similar to like one of the later ones, like part 7 maybe. He's even got someone in it from Friday the 13th part 7 actually.
Is it Jason?
It's not Jason, no.
Then I'm not interested. No, go on.
No, it's not him. It's one of the other characters is in it. But yeah, a very bad film to be avoided, although I slightly preferred it because it was sillier to the sequel to the remake, which is fucking terrible. Yeah.
It's from what I remember of the sequel to the remake, I'm going to get my words muddled. The sequel to the remake, I remember it being clearly a lower budget.
Yes.
And the story doesn't really go anywhere. And, and as I said, I am an advocate of the remake, just being disappointed. I mean, I guess it's better than the original sequel, but that's not much to go on.
I don't think it is better than the original sequel. The original sequel is just silly.
That thing about the dog flashback. I've totally forgotten that. But I have I've never seen that film all the way through, but I've continuously heard there's a dog flashback. I need to see it for that reason alone.
Yeah, so the sequel to the remake, this is why this chronology gets confused, which has incidentally nothing to do with the original sequel. It's directed by Martin Weiss, although written by Wes Craven and his son. It's basically about a group of like army cadets in sort of this desert area, and they get
it's a military testing place.
They're on some exercise, and they get picked off, and it's really boring, and it's basically aliens. It's just not very good.
Point, actually, good comparison.
It's just fucking boring, really, to be honest.
Interesting that it's Wes Craven and his son.
Yeah.
Because you get that sometimes, but just to go off on one, like John Landis likes to, I think he's passing the torch of American Werewolf onto his son.
Max.
So it's kind of like,
Max Landis.
My son can't get any work, so I'm just going to get my son to redo my thing.
I don't think it's that so much. I think with the remake of American Werewolf in London, it's just like, why not? Yeah. And it's why not? If anyone has to remake it, why not Max?
Suppose.
He likes wrestling, so Max is all right with me.
I'm sure it'd be great. And why not The Hills of Eyes 2?
Yes, why not? Now, if you want to buy the original Hills Have Eyes, which, hey, fair enough, that's kind of what we're here to talk about now. Yeah. If you want to buy it on Blu-ray and you're in Region A or Region B, you can buy it from Arrow, because it's available from Arrow, of course. Of course, it's right up their alley. If you want to buy it on DVD, like Mr. Dennett-Cook here.
Yeah, old school.
Yes, you can buy it from Anchor Bay. Anchor Bay is Region 1 and Region 2. Now, if you want to buy the remake was made by 20th Century Fox. So it's just available from 20th Century Fox. You know, wherever you are in the world,
probably on
you
Amazon.
can probably find it. But yeah, they're both both recommended as films, and you might be able to get away with them on a date, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah,